question, which, talking of the economy, is about the cost of living, and it comes from Heather, and it's this. As one of the most pressing issues, how will you tackle the cost of living crisis, particularly thinking about energy and fuel bills? And I'm just going to add a coda of my own, which is, what would you do about tax? So I'm going to start right in the middle with Kemi.
Thank you, Heather. Is the cost of living crisis. I am not promising big tax cuts and competing this. I think it's important that we're realistic about the fiscal situation. But I do recognize that a lot of people are struggling. I see it in my constituency. I think one of the quickest things we could do is look at fuel duty to reduce that. The fuel duty that we have raised as a country in the Treasury is higher than it has been, and so we have headroom to cut some duties there. I also think that there are some things we should look at around universal credit uplift and pension uplift, bringing that forward. So those are two things that I would do to address the cost of living crisis. On tax cuts, I am committed to lower personal and corporate taxes, or I am not setting exactly what rates those would be, because I think that we need to look at the fiscal situation in the round and the consequences of each and every single penny that we either take from people or give back to people.
Okay, so Tom.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks, Heather. The question of fuel price and the question of tax is one that I'm afraid we're all facing. We all feel £2 a litre. We all feel the extremely high gas price that we're all paying now. And there are several answers that we need to look at. There are some immediate ones, and that's why I've spoken about cutting fuel duty and cutting energy costs at home. That's why I've spoken about welfare uplifts, and I've spoken as well about the way in which we manage the boiler situation, which is affecting so many people, as finding engineers is a struggle. And that's why I've also spoken about our dependence on others, because the dependence that we see on Russian energy in Europe is causing price rises here in the United Kingdom. The dependence we're seeing on so many issues abroad is affecting us here at home. And that's why I'm making the case that what we really need to be doing is restoring trust with our neighbours and friends so that we can work together to lower energy costs and we can improve the opportunities for everyone in the United Kingdom. Now, we can do this, and this is also about making sure we deliver for communities further away from London. Further north you go, the more you're going to pay on energy prices and the more you're going to feel the cold. So before we get to Christmas, we need a new leader. We need a leader who can restore trust, who can build back our relationship with homes around the country and can actually deliver the cuts in prices, the cuts in energy costs that we need. Now, we'll then need an energy resilience plan to plan for the future and a 10-year plan for growth to protect our economy.
Thanks, Tom. And Penny, what would you do as Tory leader and Prime Minister to alleviate pressure on the cost of living?
Well, just starting with the tax element of your question there, Paul, although I have set out the principles on which I would be basing my tax policy, I've not made commitments to particular levels. I think that's this contest is not the right place to do it, but the principles I would be working under would be those that would enable the UK to compete on that environment. I have, though, set out some timely and limited support measures to help with cost of living. For example, halving VAT on fuel at the pump, saving you about £10 every time you fill up, and also some policies around raising thresholds for lower and middle income earners in line with inflation. Those things I think will help, but I think we need to recognise that this autumn is going to be very difficult for people. There will be more that we need to do, and although we can do more on the supply of and our reserves on energy for households and businesses, I think there are going to be some additional things we need to do, as well as looking at some of the structures around how bills are put together, the standing charge and so forth. But I also think there's more we can do to alleviate those pressures on families and businesses without actually having to spend money. For example, if we really pursue some great ideas on tax simplification, the costs of those savings to businesses of being tax compliant are going to be considerable, and probably more than any handouts that the Treasury could come up with. So I think we have to do more with less. We have to make this easier and remove burdens on families and businesses. But I'm not going to set out plans for corporation tax or any of those other taxes until we have a proper fiscal event.
Liz Truss, cost of living and energy prices and tax. What do you think?
Well, Paul, I think we immediately need to start putting money back into people's pockets. We know that families are struggling to make ends meet at the moment. So what I would do is reverse the national insurance rise. I opposed it in cabinet at the time because I thought it was a mistake. I think it's even more of a mistake now when we're facing such strong economic headwinds. I would also have a temporary moratorium on the green energy levy to cut £153 from people's energy bills. And I would also not do the corporation tax hikes because I think it's vitally important that we're attracting investment into our country. But the big problem we face here is that the public sector needs to be growing slower than the private sector. We need higher private sector growth, and we've had anemic growth for the past 2 decades. So that is going to take really strong regulatory reform, taking the full benefits of being able to do different from the EU in areas like financial services, better environmental regulation, better planning regulation, better regulation about building, so that we can get the economy going, so we can get companies investing in our country, and so we can see people's wages rise with higher paid jobs, because that is ultimately what we are going to have to do to solve our problems in the longer term. So I'd take those immediate steps to help families who are really struggling at the moment, whilst getting on with the long-term supply side reforms that, frankly, we've delayed for too long, so that we can see Britain become a fast-growing, highly innovative economy.
Liz, thanks very much. So finally, Rishi Sunak, Rishi, you're the target of some of this criticism about tax, really. So what have you got to say?
So our number, and Heather asked the most important policy question of this campaign and what the country is looking at. And the most pressing economic challenge we face is inflation. Right? Inflation is the enemy that makes everybody poorer, and it must be the government's priority to get a grip of it. And I'm not going to do anything that puts that at risk. So I will deliver tax cuts, but I will do so responsibly after we've got a grip of inflation. And I think that's the right thing to do. And indeed, that's what Margaret Thatcher did in the early 80s. And it's an approach to the economy that's been supported by many people familiar with her thinking. Now, I published a tax plan earlier this year, and it set out my plans for the future. We do need to cut and reform business taxation. We need to do it in a way that actually drives growth and productivity, getting businesses to invest more and to innovate more in R&D. So we'll do that if I'm elected leader. We also need to reward hard work, because that's a core Conservative value, which is why I've put in our plans and paid for a cut to income tax before the end of this Parliament. On energy, Heather knows that this is the biggest problem that everyone is facing. I've announced lots of things already as a government that we collectively have stood behind. We have not done a good enough job of communicating that, so we need to improve that to make sure people understand that the help that they are getting, which is considerable over the autumn and winter, to help with some of those bills. But that's only a short-term fix. What we also need to do is improve the supply of energy we have over the long term. So look at new sources of homegrown energy, whether that's the North Sea with gas or offshore wind. We need to double down on all that. Similarly with home insulation, where we can help save money off people's bills in relatively short order by improving energy efficiency of their homes. Those are the type of long-term ways we can help on the energy side, as well as the short-term fixes. But lastly, the most important thing to say is the best way to help people with the cost of living and put more money in their pockets is to make sure that they're in well-paid jobs. So we need to move people off welfare into work, make sure they've got the skills they need to get better paid jobs. That's the Conservative way to help people, and that's the best long-term way to deal with this problem.
Okay, Rishi, thanks very much.